Why did the pasta maker get locked out of the kitchen?
Why?
Because it had gnocchi.
I love gnocchi.
Hungry Squared, bringing you the best food talk anywhere.
Welcome to the Hungry Squared podcast, where the brain and belly meet. I'm Sharon from the Wasatch Cooking Guide.
And I'm Winter from theredparty.com. This week, we are talking about tomatoes. Tomatoes?
Tomato.
Whatever. Let's talk about it.
Looking for Hungry Squared, yeah, Hungry Squared.
Hello, Sharon.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. You guys don't know this, but we took a week off because we had kind of gotten a couple of interviews done at once. So it's been a while since we've seen each other.
Yeah.
So it's nice. There was a lot of chatting before we hit record. How was your week though?
It was really good.
Yeah. Did you eat anything fun?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let's hear it.
We went to Tsunami.
Oh, okay.
It's
It's
a really good sushi place here in Salt Lake City. They fly their fish in daily, fresh fish, to our landlocked state. So it's really super tasty. It's one of the better sushi places in town, I think.
I think I'd agree with you on that.
And we had green mussel shooters.
Oh, well, okay. Describe that a little bit. So you got green mussels.
Green mussels, and they're chopped up. They're on the mussel shell.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put a quail egg in there. They separate the egg out.
Okay.
So they put the quail egg yolk at the end of it.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a bunch of the tobiko, the crunchy little poppity fish eggs on top.
Mm-hmm. Those are good.
Yeah.
Wait, so was the egg raw?
Yes.
It was.
It was.
And was the mussel raw?
Or
was that
it was all
steamed?
chopped up. I think it was a little bit steamed.
Okay.
Because that tasted cooked.
Okay. Or was it like ceviche, so it was kind of quote unquote cooked with acid? Is that right?
Right. That's what ceviche is. Yeah. I mean, it didn't take, the texture of the mussels was not off or anything like that.
Okay.
They weren't hot. I mean, they were just on the half shell.
Uh-huh.
So all of that was just piled on the half shell. And then the pretty egg yolk was at the tip of it.
What?
So it was a mistake.
Wait, what?
We got somebody else's mussel shooters. We didn't order them.
Oh,
we just thought the
chef
chef was being really nice because we were sitting at the bar.
Oh,
and we got such great service there. So if you guys are ever in Salt Lake City, go to Tsunami. We got such great service there. We were at their South Jordan location.
Okay,
and they had like 10 chefs behind the bar, so they were all like
hustling and bustling.
Yeah, it was so fast. But so fun because they were really nice and chatty. And, we were asking about the different things that they were making and stuff like that. So it was fun. But this guy just ran over and put it in front of us. And so we're like, okay. And we kind of looked at it. We looked at each other and they're like, oh, did you not order that? And we're like, no, it's okay. So we totally ate it. And I think we ate somebody else's.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. And it was good.
It was delicious. That was probably
quail
the best
egg
thing that we
yolk.
ate.
And everything.
Yes. It's good.
Really?
Yeah. Because
is it a little cream? I don't even know.
So you're supposed to shoot it.
Yeah.
So it just kind of
goes down
all in one little thing. I couldn't do it because it was piled a little bit too high for my mouth.
Yeah. Okay.
So I kind of ate it in like 3 bites.
Okay.
But it was still really tasty. The egg with the mussels was really yummy.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. I don't know if I would put that together, honestly.
Yeah. Well, we had to figure out what it was. They put this beautiful thing in front of us. It's very pretty. And so we just looked at each other and we're like, I guess we're going to eat this. It sounds good. And we were both really hungry.
Yeah.
So it was pretty convenient because it's an appetizer, but we had no idea what it was. But I'm like, oh, they put food in front of us and it's really pretty. So I'm just going to eat it. That was my mentality.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what we did. And then as we were looking at what else we were going to order, like we kept one menu,
Yeah.
Because you order some rolls and then you order some more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, that must be what we ate. We both thought it was super good, but we just didn't know what it was.
You just didn't, and you didn't know that there was an egg. Did you know it was an egg before you?
Yeah, no, it looks like an egg.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, well, that looks like an egg. And he's like, yep. We ate it
down the hatch,
and it's a quail egg, so it's quite
small.
a bit smaller.
Small, yeah.
Yeah.
It lends some fattiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So I would encourage you to get the green mussel shooters.
Okay, green mussel shooters at Tsunami. Ooh.
Yeah. What did you eat this week?
I had a little bit of a disappointing what did I eat this week? And that doesn't happen very often, you guys.
It doesn't.
You probably know this. So, and I'm worried because I'm pretty sure you've been there before and I think you like it, but I don't know. You can remind me. So we were dropping by a friend's house. She had just been in a car accident and she lived kind of close to this restaurant, Hub and Spoke.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and I had never been there before and I've heard wonderful things about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, well, let's just stop by because we dropped her off some dinner that she could just eat whenever and have leftovers and stuff. So it was kind of like, oh, what are we going to eat kind of a thing.
Right.
So we decided to stop by Hub and Spoke because it was rather nearby. It was in that neighborhood. So we went in, and if you have never been to Hub and Spoke before, it's a little bit of a hipster place, wouldn't you say?
Sure. It's got like an industrial farmhouse vibe.
Yeah. It's very, it's kind of, it feels like a very trendy place.
Mm-hmm.
I think we fit in just fine. I like Lee and I kind of look like hipster couple because Lee has a beard and glasses and I'm Asian. So it works out. And so we go there and for dinner. Okay. So mind you, the only times I've heard people go there actually have been for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
So I
have never been there for dinner.
Right. So I ordered, I saw the thing that I honed in on this one thing. It was a Navajo taco because I love Navajo tacos.
Yeah, the flatbread.
Super love Navajo tacos. I mean, I grew up in southern Utah on an Indian reservation. And
yeah.
And so they made Navajo tacos there and it was dang good. So I got that. Lee got the bacon wrapped meatloaf and we ordered an appetizer of, what was it? The onion dip with, is that right? No, we did artichoke. It was an artichoke, a cheese artichoke dip with some crackers.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say that the appetizer was the best thing that we had because it was amazing.
Really?
Like, you know how sometimes they just give you a handful of crackers?
Mm-hmm.
We used all the crackers very quickly. And
because it was so good.
It was so good. And there was still a lot of cheese left. And so there was like dipping other things that we could find into it because it was so good because we didn't want to waste it.
Like your spoon?
Yeah, just straight kind of a thing. So there was that. But then, like I said, I had this Navajo taco and it was just kind of a bummer. It was just like, meh. You know, it was okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Lee got his bacon wrapped meatloaf and it had some mashed potatoes and some glazed carrots and stuff. And same thing, he kind of just thought, it was okay. Like when you hear,
could make better at home.
Yeah, kind of a thing. Does that make sense? Like
yeah.
I go out to like, that's kind of the fun about going to places like a sushi restaurant, for example. Mm-hmm. I am not good at making sushi.
Yeah, I'll go and buy it.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I was just a little bummed because I was like, ugh. But that being said, I have only heard of people going there for breakfast.
Yeah.
And so, and their breakfast always looks really good. And I feel like you can't really screw up breakfast.
Yeah, it is difficult.
Right.
Unless it's a beignet that they have is like leaded dough.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem right there. So maybe I'm going to have to try it again and give it another whirl. Oh, the other thing I had was a chocolate peanut butter shake there.
How was the shake?
And it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have regular shakes and they have boozy shakes.
And I saw that and I was like, I can see how this would be like a kind of a fun thing for people to do, get at, you know, but we don't drink, like my family doesn't drink. And so just the regular chocolate Oreo cookie shake was pretty good. I really liked it. And Lucy drank about half of it.
Of course she did.
She gained probably a pound from drinking that shake alone.
What did Lucy have?
She shared our stuff.
Oh.
So it was a lot of eat this random piece of food and eat this random piece of food because she just doesn't pay attention that much when we're at restaurants. So
I was just wondering, she's almost getting to the point where she can eat her own meal though. Like I've seen her put away some food.
She can, but she's at the point where she gets super distracted by anything. So if you're not like, here's a fork, stick it in your mouth with this food on it, you're not getting anywhere with that girl. So, oh yeah, adventures. I will put the link in show notes for both Tsunami and Hub and Spoke. If you'd like to disagree with me about Hub and Spoke, let me know. I'd like to know what I should get the next time I am there.
And now for the main course.
Let's get down to our first topic at hand, tomatoes.
Tomatoes! Actually,
Attack of the killer tomatoes.
it's everywhere in popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. We got this as a listener request, actually. This is a friend of ours. His name is Troy. He goes by T-Roy. And so he actually had a huge list of episode ideas that we needed to cover. And this was one of them that was at the very end. It said the history of the tomato. So we're getting around to it, Troy. This is it.
We're working through
your list. Dang it. We'll get to it eventually. So thanks, Troy, for requesting that episode. So if you have if anybody wants to request a future episode, feel free to email us at hungrysquared@gmail.com. But the tomato, Sharon.
Yeah.
Do you like tomatoes?
I do. America likes tomatoes.
America loves tomatoes.
It is the second most popular vegetable in the United States.
What's the first one?
Potatoes.
Oh, okay. Should have figured that out.
Even though it's a starch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah.
Tell me about the tomato.
Well, the tomato is quite popular and it belongs to the nightshade family.
Indeed, it does.
They started out small, kind of like a bitter berry, growing on kind of coastal deserts in South America. Today, they've been domesticated, so basically they're grown everywhere. They're all sorts of shapes and sizes and colors because, you've got your green tomatoes and your heirlooms and things like that are really pretty and kind of stripy. But most tomatoes that you see, like commercially in the grocery store and whatnot, they are going to be red, pretty juicy. They are rich in vitamin C. And if you're getting the red kind, then you've got lycopene.
Yeah, lycopene.
So you get that nutrient mostly from the red tomatoes. And you find it a lot in like tomato paste and ketchup and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Tomatoes have an interesting anatomy that you can kind of use all of it. They've got a tough cuticle or a skin that's sometimes removed when you're cooking them or when they're canned.
Right.
There is the pith, which is kind of the whiter part in the center.
Mm-hmm.
Still edible, but a lot of people will kind of core a tomato, just scoop that top part of the pith out.
Right.
You've got the fruit wall, which is mostly the meat of the tomato.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the tomato jelly, which is where the seeds are suspended in.
Right. Which some people like and other people do not.
Yeah, it kind of depends.
Yeah, because that can be a weird texture too.
Yeah, it depends on the tomato too, like how sweet the tomato is, things like that. Something that I found interesting about the tomato is that it actually is not sweet, not typically sweet. It is one of the less sweet fruits. Yeah, it is technically a fruit.
It is botanically speaking a fruit, a berry of sorts.
Yeah.
Because, and I just want to point out, if you have not listened to our condiments episode, we do talk about ketchup.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, ketchup and mustard. We do go into it being botanically a fruit.
Right.
But culinarily a vegetable.
And ruled in the court system, the U.S. court system
ruled
as a vegetable.
Yep. I believe it was in 1887 because of a tariff that was imposed on a duty of vegetables, and somebody didn't want to pay and said, you know what? Tomatoes are fruits. And they ruled in favor of it being a vegetable because culinarily it was used as a vegetable. Okay. So yes, it is. I think it's not very sweet generally.
Yeah, generally it's not. It's relatively low sugar content for a fruit. It has around 3%, which is similar to cabbage and Brussels sprouts.
Oh, really?
Interesting, huh? Yeah. That is according to Harold McGee. That's where I'm getting a lot of my information tonight. Ripe tomatoes have an unusually large amount of something called glutamic acid. It's as much as 0.3% of their weight, which is actually quite a bit, as well as some aromatic sulfur compounds. And those sulfur aromas and the glutamic acid are more common in something like meat than it is in fruit or vegetables.
Right.
So
it's an amino acid that kind of has that, monosodium glutamate, like that's kind of that umami flavor.
Yeah. And that's why tomatoes pair so well with meats.
Okay.
That's part of the reason why. And it also contributes to, if a tomato goes rotten, why it smells so extremely bad
Oh.
because of those aromas and stuff like that.
Okay.
Similar to when meat would spoil and things.
Interesting.
So meat pairs well with tomatoes, like a marinara meat sauce type thing, or your lettuce and tomato on your burger, that kind of thing. So I thought that was cool. Some other things about tomatoes. So tomatoes, their overall flavor can be intensified by the addition of both sugar and an acid, even though tomatoes are acidic. They can be allowed to ripen fully on the vine and they'll accumulate more sugar that way.
Right.
And more acid in the aroma compounds that make them tasty. That aroma contributes to the flavor. And you need to vine ripen your tomatoes to get the most flavor. But that's why frequently, like a supermarket tomato won't taste as good as a homegrown tomato.
Yeah, it really is.
Because they don't have that vine ripened flavor.
Yeah, they don't. It tastes really watery in comparison.
Yeah. There is an important element of the ripe tomato flavor, and it's an aroma compound called furanol. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's furaneol. So it resembles a sweet savory caramel scent, which also contributes to the flavor of something like a ripe strawberry or a ripe pineapple.
Okay.
So those ripe fruits have this same aroma compound that tomatoes have. Supermarket tomatoes are picked while they're still green or just barely red, but they're not quite ripened. They're usually artificially stimulated to redden them using like ethylene gas.
Basically.
Like they do with bananas and stuff like
and
that.
Avocados, like we've talked about in the past.
Right. So they don't have that, even though they look ripe, they don't have that ripe flavor.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an important ingredient missing. And that's why when you go out into your garden, your tomatoes always taste better than what you can buy. Or if you go to the farmer's market, something like that. Something that's interesting about cooked tomatoes is that they gain some flavors when you're cooking them. They can get some rose and violet-like fragments from their pigments, and they lose the fresher green notes, but cooking them kind of allows some of the flavors to be more complex and things like that.
Yeah.
But something that's missing is a little bit of freshness. So a lot of times you'll see like chefs will kind of cut through the richness with like some basil or fresher notes like that with some herbs. A lot of cooks will use tomato leaves in sauces.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So this is according to Harold McGee. There's a lot of chefs that when they're making these, you know, tomato sauces that like a bolognese or something like that, that has just been stewing away
for hours
and hours and hours. They want to kind of get some freshness back into it. And so they'll use tomato leaves. But then that was frowned on for a long time because they were thought to be poisonous.
Right. Because they were clumped into the nightshade family and kind of got a bad rap.
Right. But so tomato leaves were considered potentially toxic because they contain a defensive alkaloid called tomotine. But recent research has found that tomotine binds tightly to cholesterol molecules in our digestive system so that the body absorbs neither the alkaloid nor its bound partner. It thus reduces our net intake of cholesterol. Green tomatoes also contain tomotine and have the same effect. So he cites this research as being okay to use fresh tomato leaves, like at the end finish your sauce with.
And then do you pull those out? Okay. Yeah. So it's more just to kind of liven it up and then remove it. Okay.
Right. So I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I have never heard that. And I think maybe it's because of what I have heard about the tomato plant and its long sordid history.
Which is?
It's gotten a bad rap, Sharon. That's all I'm going to say.
It is.
It's gotten
a deadly nightshade.
It is. Yeah. Okay. So this is, I'm going to delve into a little bit of the history because I thought it was so interesting. In the late 1700s, I would say a lot of Europeans feared the tomato. They did not like the tomato. They thought it was poisonous. It had the nickname of the poison apple. The reason being, and I thought this was so interesting, was that aristocrats got sick and died after eating them. But really likely what was happening was these Europeans were the ones that could afford nicer things. The wealthy Europeans used pewter plates Now,
Yes, I was reading about that too.
they have a high lead content. And so because of the tomatoes, it is high in acidity. So you have your tomatoes there. It's leaching out the lead way better than anything else.
Yeah, from that pewter plate.
And then over time, you're just getting, these people were getting lead poisoning. And so they didn't understand what was happening. Like they didn't understand the chemistry or whatever. And so they basically said it must be the tomato that is killing these people off. It's the poison apple. Now,
it's the poison plate.
Yeah, it is the poison plate. So now that was back in the 1700s. The next century, pizza came around in Italy, Naples. And so it started to kind of get a little bit more popular in Europe. But in America, the stigma still stuck around. And I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why it stuck around for so long. I'm actually going to be quoting Andrew F. Smith. He wrote a book called The Tomato in America, Early History, Culture, and Cookery.
Okay.
He's very much into this. And so he's basically saying, you know what? They kind of got this bad rap, like because they got classified as a deadly nightshade. It is a poisonous family of the Solanaceae plants because they do contain that. There's a toxin called tropane alkaloids. And those can definitely cause some issues. They can have anticholinergic or stimulant effects on people. So yes, it would make sense if you're like, oh, we're lumping these together. So now I'm going to propose the reason why is that there were kind of three major things that I think help perpetuate this bad rap for the tomato.
Three major things?
I would say.
Okay.
And it's because of people that are writing, like, I think of them as bloggers of the time. Just kidding. Okay, I'll take that back.
What were the food bloggers of yore saying?
So an Italian herbalist, Pietro Andre Mattioli, he classified this as the golden apple. He classified this tomato as a nightshade. So first of all, stuck it into this category that is known to be poisonous. And then he also stuck it as, called it a mandrake. And a mandrake has been known as a temptation. I don't know if that makes, yeah.
Like the poison apple?
Kind of. Like it's originally the mandrake is a root or a plant from this particular region, but it's mentioned in the Old Testament, the mandrake plant, not the tomato, the mandrake as being something that is a temptation. And so the fact that he classified this into these two groups of a nightshade and a mandrake made it basically bad on 2 points. It's poisonous and it's a source of temptation. So that's one thing that kind of got stuck into people's mind. The next person that was very influential, another influential blogger, apparently at the time, was this gentleman. He was John Gerard. He was a barber surgeon. Don't you love that?
Yes.
At the time, in 1597.
That's where they get the barber pole. That's like the...
Oh, ew.
Yep. They used to dry their towels on that.
Oh, no.
That's why it's the red...
No.
Stripey,
no, it's not.
Swirl.
No, it's not. I'm going to deny that. Ooh. This gentleman was
according to urban legend. I'm not sure if that's true, but I've heard that several times.
Ugh. So he is a barber surgeon, and he had a publication that he basically plagiarized from a different publication heavily. So John Gerard's publication was Herbal in 1597, and he really did a ton of like plagiarizing from this other book that was published in 1553. And I mean, like, they're like, he misspelled stuff. He pulled the wrong.
Oh man.
Like it was all sorts of bad. But then he also opined.
Sure.
I think that's right. Like sometimes I use words and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. He wrote in his book, he considered the whole plant to be of rank and stinking savor. The fruit was corrupt, which he left to every man's censure. While the leaves and stalk of the tomato plant are toxic, the fruit is not. So even just that little bit of information in his book kind of got people like, this is not great. It's toxic, it's rank and stinking. I mean, like, he did not like it, and he told everybody what he thought about it. It really is amazing how much you can influence somebody.
Yeah. You print it in a book, even if it's false, or you plagiarized it and people totally believe it.
Oh yeah. It's totally crazy. So it eventually starts to pick up because like you said, the tomato is really very popular in the Americas. That's where it originated from. The Aztecs were eating it. It became a little bit more noticeable to the Spanish conquistadors that came over. And that's when they started bringing it over. Now, the thing that I found really interesting, because it was kind of really starting to take on some like, okay, this could be something that we could eat. The tricky part, though, was despite the fact that all these kind of fears of it being poisonous, they did start to love it. And the problem was, though, that something happened in the 1800s in America. The green tomato worm started to show up.
Green tomato worm?
Yeah. And this was another thing that made people really kind of scared of tomatoes, is because they're large green worms with these curve-like horn things coming out of its back. Yeah, it's not...
What?
Mm-hmm. They talked about these starting to infest these tomato patches in the United States. They talked about in New York City, for example. And they actually, let me read it to you because it's pretty much like the description is awesome. The tomato in all of our gardens is infested with a very large, thick-bodied green worm with oblique white sterols along its side and a curved thorn-like horn at the end of its back. Doesn't that sound awful? Like, ugh. And so a lot of people were
disturbed,
grossed out by this. A man named Dr. Fuller in New York was quoted in the Syracuse Standard saying that he had found a 5-inch tomato worm in his garden. He captured the worm and he's like, it is poisonous as a rattlesnake because it spit on me and my skin started to swell immediately. Like he was and eventually the fear subsided because they came back and people that studied this little caterpillars, like it's not deadly. It just wants to eat tomato leaves. Okay. So those are kind of some major things that really kept the tomato from coming into full fruition for a long time in America. Well, and even in Europe, it just took some time. It's still considered, we all know it's a part of the nightshade family, but it kind of got clumped into that for one reason or the other. So, but like you said, the tomato is the second most eaten vegetable.
It is.
And it is produced commercially by China. I think they're the number one commercial producer of tomatoes. And in the United States alone, holy cow, we eat a ton of tomatoes and consume a lot of tomatoes. So it's come back. Like it had a really sordid history, but it finally won America over. And I think the rest of the world too.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this poor little tomato. Now the eggplant kind of got stuck into the nightshade family too. So I think the eggplant that's a little tougher to go with. Not very many people like eggplant, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I eat it in Italian, like eggplant parmesan or moussaka, like Greek food.
Yeah, it's pretty.
But just to kind of eat eggplant, it's not really something I do.
Yeah, it's not on your radar. So once again, you get stuck into the nightshade family and you're screwed.
Yeah. It's all downhill.
It's all downhill. You have to fight with worms and bloggers and
bloggers of yore.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting because, the tomato has been around for a long time, but just gotten a bad rap, Sharon.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about a little bit of one of my favorite tomato recipes.
Oh.
And I think it's one of your favorite tomato recipes.
What is it?
Because we've made it together before.
We have?
Yes.
What?
Roasted tomatoes.
Oh, yes. Hello. Yeah. I think I know which one you're going to talk about specifically.
Yeah.
Because there's one recipe that is so good, you guys.
So good. So my family doesn't really like tomatoes unless they're in a sauce. It's really tragic.
It is really tragic. I'm going to say that tomatoes, I think, you either love them or you hate them.
Yeah, I love them. But
me too.
They will eat it in a sauce on pizza or with pasta or something like that. So I wanted to kind of share a recipe. I'm not going to try to violate copyright or anything like that for these roasted tomatoes. But I wanted to share an excerpt from one of my favorite books. It's made a huge impact on my life. Like I went out and bought this book on Winter's recommendation, I think.
It's such a good book.
It's called A Homemade Life, and it's by Molly Weisenberg. She's the creator of the Orangette blog. She also has a podcast called Spilled Milk, which is really cool. Anyway, this book is kind of older. It's her first book, and it's from 2009. So it's almost 10 years old. Yeah. But she has a chapter in here called Happiness. And I just love the way that she writes about the tomatoes. So I'm going to share an excerpt.
Do it.
She says, I first tasted slow roasted tomatoes one hot summer several years ago, the summer after I returned from working in Paris and before I moved to Seattle. I was in Oklahoma staying with my parents for a few months, and one day a glut of tomatoes from the garden sent us running for the cookbook shelf. Each spring, my father used to start tomato plants in tiny pots in the laundry room, and by mid-July they were so big, so top-heavy, that they would droop over the driveway until he tied them to the fence. That summer was an especially good one. The fruits were sweet and fat, coming ripe by the dozen. We needed to get rid of a bunch of them all at once, so we set out for ideas. We scoured 2 shelves of cookbooks when we stumbled upon a technique called slow roasting. It called for the tomatoes to be halved lengthwise and put into a low oven for several hours so that their juices went thick and syrupy and their flavor climbed to a fever pitch. Following the loose guidelines, we sent 2 pans of tomatoes into the oven, and 6 hours later, we opened the door to find them entirely transformed. They were fleshy and deep red, with edges that crinkled like smocking on a child's dress. When we bit into them, they shot rich vermilion juice across the table, and we were sold. Over the course of those few months, we must have roasted a half dozen sheet pans worth. We ate them plain, straight from the pan, or with mozzarella and basil. We put them into sandwiches. We used them to sauce fresh pasta that my father had flattened with a rolling pin and cut into small rustic rags. It was a very good summer, which is a good thing as it turns out because it was his last. So she goes on, this whole memoir is kind of her memories of her dad and him dying and things like that and the impact it made on her life. But she's got all of these recipes in this book and it's fantastic. But her slow roasted tomatoes with coriander, she basically tells you to get a low oven.
Yeah.
200 degrees, 250, whatever you feel like.
That's
less
the
than
best
200. And she says basically this is like a no-fail recipe. Just as long as you roast the tomatoes slow and low, at least for about 4 hours. You could do it up to 10 if you wanted to.
Which we've done before.
Get about 3 pounds of ripe tomatoes. They can be any kind of tomato. If you get a Roma tomato, they're a little bit less juicy.
Right.
So you get more of that meat. She just does about a tablespoon of olive oil and a little bit of salt and a little bit of ground coriander sprinkled over those halves. And you just put them cut side up and let them roast.
Your house, you guys, you don't even know.
It will smell like heaven.
Oh my gosh. I like whenever we do that, because we always do it at the end of the summer to make. She also has a slow roasted tomato basil pesto that is but you do have to have the slow roasted tomatoes to be a part of it, or else those flavors don't sing, I think.
Yeah.
But like it's the best thing ever. It's so good. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that book, that cookbook. It's a book that reads like she has essays along with the recipes, and it is worth, like, I don't think I've made anything bad in that book at all.
Me neither. And
like I have many.
You can see I'm flipping my copy in front of Winter, and I have a lot of dog-eared pages.
Yep.
And I normally don't do that to books because I think that's disrespectful to the book. But I need them for fast reference because I've made so many of these recipes.
Yep. They really are so good.
And I make them again and again.
Yep. And they're like winners. People are like, where did you get this? And I'm like, let me tell you. So
yeah, whenever I've made a recipe and I've shared it, because there's been some recipes that I haven't shared with people, but whenever I've shared any of these recipes, people have been wanting to know where I got the recipe, like how did I make it? I get tons of compliments.
Yeah, it's super easy to follow and make. So I would highly recommend it. But yes, that is, slow roasted tomatoes, you guys.
So if your family doesn't like the tomato for some reason, maybe you don't like the tomato, try the slow roasted tomato.
Yeah, it's so good because it does bring out the different flavor compounds. Like you said, it kind of gets a little deeper, not as bright.
Yeah.
But it's it's delicious. Oh,
yeah.
I love tomatoes. Speaking of tomato flavors.
Yeah.
I have to share this last little bit of information.
Okay.
So there's there's actually 2 groups of researchers that last year in 2017, they basically wanted to pinpoint why commercial tomatoes were tasting so bad.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but they're like,
They don't taste the same as
they don't like
stuff
it.
that you get at the farmer's market.
Yeah, or what you can grow in your garden and that type of thing. So this group based in Florida, there's one group in Florida and then one group in China. And China is the largest producer of tomatoes. So they are like invested, like, why do our commercially prepared tomatoes not taste as great? And, they were, because of the way agriculture has gone, right? Tomato crops were bred for like higher yields. They wanted like a redder color. They wanted more firm. They wanted disease resistant tomatoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, the problem is it kind of sacrificed the taste because they were trying to do stuff to make it like appear and be a certain way, but they didn't really focus on taste. Right. So over the years, through generations of countless breeding of these tomatoes, then you kind of lost that flavor. So I love this team. They set out to decode which the tomato genome and which ones would basically affect the likability of a tomato. I thought this is so fun.
The tomato genome?
Yeah. They just totally went for it. So they sequenced the genomes of 398 tomato varieties. And that ranges from commercially grown stuff all the way down to like wild ancestral tomatoes that you might not really see too much of, heirloom tomatoes that you can see. And then as they did that, what they did was they got consumer panels and they conducted taste tests on 101 of these university grown tomato varieties. Once again, all the way from commercially available down to the kind of wild heirloom varieties, and found out which tomatoes they liked the best.
So did they find commonalities?
Yes, they found 13 chemical compounds that were strongly linked to likability from those consumer panels.
Oh, wow.
And so they were just kind of talking, one of their conclusions was like, okay, now we've found these. Now maybe it's just a matter of like, okay, these specific genes that are responsible for these volatiles that are very important to when you bite into it, you need to smell those, you need to smell too as part of eating that tomato, is that these kind of hardier tomatoes can be bred with some of these ones that with these desirable genomes for taste and bred together in several generations and be able to have a good hardy, like we said, a hardier fruit that could stand up to commercial production, but be also tastier. I thought that was fun. That was really,
wow.
I was like, oh my goodness, people are doing cool, fun stuff with food. And so this actually was published in the Science magazine in January 2017. So I'll link in the show notes. You do have to pay for it if you want to read the article. But I will put a link in the show notes for that one because I was like, yeah, commercially grown tomatoes are not tasty.
Yeah. So many times it's just kind of blah, especially when you buy tomatoes off season.
Oh,
yeah.
What's the point? Like right now we kind of bought some tomatoes recently. I was like, that was not awesome.
But to make another plug for Molly's book, she does say that you can buy the tasteless Roma tomatoes in the winter if you slow roast them.
That will help them.
That will transform them.
Yes. To me, I think tomatoes are lovely. And we have a couple of people related to us that do not like tomatoes.
But you're not going to name names?
Not going to name names.
Just know that you're a relation and she's thinking of you.
And I think it is a bummer because of the fact they like the taste. They don't like the texture. And I can kind of see that.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with that kind of jelly-like consistency on the inside where the seeds are.
Sure.
But I do think it is a little bit of a shame because I think tomatoes are lovely in kind of all shapes and forms, like from the raw to cooked or stewed or whatever you want to do with it. So do you like tomatoes, people? I'm kind of curious.
Tell us.
Vote. Do you like tomatoes?
Let's have a food fight.
Food fight, food fight, food fight, food fight.
This is the segment where you can email us with your relationship questions relating to food. You can email us at hungrysquared@gmail.com.
Disclaimer, we are in no way professional relationship experts, but you should totally listen to us anyway. If you need professional help, please seek it out.
Food fight, food fight, food fight. The food fight segment of the show. Here we go.
Okay, Sharon. We haven't done a food fight for quite a long time because we've had a whole slew of awesome interviews.
Yeah, and it's been great.
It's been so great. And so we've been asking you to send them in if you happen to have them to hungrysquared@gmail.com. So what do we got for today since it's just the two of us today?
Well, this one's kind of short, but it's it's funny. I mean, it's kind of funny. It says, Dear Winter and Sharon, how do you deal with snarky comments about your food choices? Recently, I've dealt with a few on Instagram and I have a really hard time being civil. Thanks. Junk food has feelings too.
Oh, ugh.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody now and again will get a snarky comment about food, whether you're talking to somebody who has maybe an ethical reason for not eating what you're eating.
Yeah.
Or a high horse.
Yeah.
Or like on social media, like this is an age where we Foodstagram.
All the time.
We Instagram our food or Facebook it, you know, we're constantly taking pictures of food and
I am. Yeah. I am.
There's lots of pretty food pictures, you know, you can just kind of get lost in like the rabbit hole of food pictures, right? You know, like, oh, look how beautiful this tomato juice looks. And I would never drink tomato juice, you know? Like there's just, I mean, I don't know. There's a whole kind of subculture of that on social media of the food pictures.
Yeah.
And some people aren't very nice about it.
They're not. I have had that happen to me, I want to say a couple of times.
Yeah.
And my first reaction is to be like,
how dare you?
How dare you? This is what I want to eat, dang it. That was my first reaction. Second reaction is, okay, I need to calm down. Third
reaction is, how dare you?
No, my third reaction is like, I'm going to say something snarky back. Then my fourth reaction is to go talk to my husband, Lee, who has a little bit steadier head. And and he says, okay, Winter, like, calm down. Don't attack somebody on social media because of something they said.
I actually started following somebody because of this reason.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't know if you guys know who Chrissy Teigen is.
Oh, yeah.
She is married to John Legend. She's a model. She's very famous. She has lots of followers on Instagram.
She has a cookbook too.
She does. She's gearing up for another one coming out soon.
Oh, yeah.
I know this because I follow her.
Yeah.
And she got a lot of flack for posting a picture of, I think it was,
it was not
corned beef and cabbage.
Yes, it was not very pretty.
Yeah. And Nigella Lawson has also gotten flack for posting pictures of brown food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
those are
it's ugly,
yeah,
you know,
but it's like comfort food most of the time.
Yeah. And a lot of times comfort food is brown or it's all orange or white or something. It's just, it's not a pretty salad.
It's not
with
Instagram.
Kale and pomegranate seeds,
right.
You know, but it's still good food. And so she's got some really good comebacks on social media to her haters. And I don't know. I really admired how she kind of stuck up for comfort food.
Yeah. I mean,
kind of odd and funny. But she basically said, hey, you're not invited to dinner anyway.
Yeah. And
so, I mean, you know, not your cup of tea is not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
Yes, exactly. So if you can come back, I generally try to stay neutral about these kind of things because people have their opinions. And I'm going to just tell you right now, like, having worked in the industry that I do, it really, like, try and convince somebody to do something and they read something on the internet.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We work in healthcare, people.
So if that tells you anything.
So don't go on WebMD. It will always say that you have cancer, or just, Google, not necessarily dogging on WebMD. But if you look up your symptoms, you'll always have cancer. You'll always be dying.
Yeah, it will
always be super serious, even if you just have the sniffles or a headache.
Yeah. So that's why I'm like, you're not going to convince somebody that kind of gets snarky about, like, if you posted a lovely picture of a steak or something and you get some snarky comment from somebody that's from PETA or from that's a vegan or whatever. I'm not once again not
vegetarian coalition in your town.
Yes, and whatever. Once again not dogging on because the people that are vegetarian and vegans that I know are very kind, actually.
Right.
They've never made a snarky comment.
It's just a stereotype.
Yes, but I generally just say, I have had a hard time convincing anybody differently. If they're food is very personal to a lot of people, so you're not going to convince them to do anything different. And you were probably in not a good state of mind either to change your ways.
Yeah.
I'm not usually. I'm usually very defensive. So I always have to just this is my way of coping. I just ignore the comment.
Yeah.
If I have to stay off of that social media for a little bit so I can kind of cool off, then that's what I do. And I make if I'm going to make a comment, it's a very generic comment.
Yeah.
About stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
I mean, anymore nowadays, like your news feed, like what is it full of? People's babies, the news.
Oh, the news.
Politics.
Yeah.
And food.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what mine is.
My feed is very similar to that, actually. So
then I just kind of skip over people's political posts. I look at news sites that I can double check and verify. But then, that all gets exhausting. And so I'm like, ooh, what did you have for dinner? That looks good. I might make that. And let me see your cute child. And okay, kind of make myself feel better so I can kind of come down from the adrenaline of the political world. But I mean, sometimes food is like politics though.
Oh,
you just have to let it alone. Like food on social media is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like if not, your cup of tea is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. We're not all going to agree on the exact same thing. Like there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like babies, rainbows, and ice cream. I don't know. Some basic stuff that maybe you think everybody should love.
Yeah. You will always disagree with somebody. So don't let it get under their skin. Just be fine with it. Just like, once again, you're not probably going to convince them about anything.
Yeah. Just let it go.
Just let it go. It's totally fine. It'll be fine.
Thanks for joining us today for our show. You can find us at hungrysquared.com, on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and you can follow us on Spotify.
Yeah, we're on Spotify, you guys. Okay, so there's a bunch of you that, you're the young generation.
Thanks, young generation on Spotify.
Okay, we have Spotify, so yeah. But it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, the new generation only listens to things on Spotify. I was like, oh, really? Okay.
We'll find out what our podcast is about, and we'll be on Spotify too.
Yeah, so there you go. We would love if you subscribed and or followed us wherever you're following us, and leave us a rating and review. That totally helps us, other people discover our podcast. And you guys, we have had a lot of fun on Instagram and Facebook. Hello, did you see that episode from last week with Cristoferio? Super fun.
Yes.
And did you see that little video about coffee beans being roasted and you can hear the crack?
Yeah.
It's so much fun, you guys. Okay, so just head on over.
Pop.
Yeah. Head on over to Facebook and you'll see our video there. It's so fun. Anyway, join us next week for our next episode of Food Nerdery.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.
Hungry Squared, yeah, Hungry Squared.